The second component that we're going to talk about is known as the AgilePoint developer, which sits on top of Microsoft Visual Studio. The AgilePoint developer is used by developers to build the front end of the process that was designed by the process owners and published to the AgilePoint server. Notice that the developer now gets an additional template known as the AgilePoint Web Application template. Upon mentioning the location for the creation of the ASP.NET application for the budget request approval process and clicking on the OK button, the AgilePoint Web Application wizard opens up. This wizard adds an AgilePoint process template file in Microsoft Visio format. Notice that the AgilePoint process template file is the same budget request approval process template that was designed and published to the AgilePoint server. AgilePoint Developer attaches the process template and builds the application structure, thereby reducing the amount of code required to be written by the developers. Behind the scenes, the AgilePoint developer creates the AgilePoint task list page used to view each individual tasks, creates the visual process viewer, which is a snapshot of the process that is published to the AgilePoint server, and creates the front-end pages associated with each manual activity defined in the process model. It also automatically adds the namespaces and inheritances from AgilePoint base classes for each code behind class of the ASPX page and adds the AgilePoint web service references to interact with the AgilePoint server. This is how the structure of the budget request approval process demo application looks like. For the sake of the demonstration, I would be using an existing application that was created on similar lines as the one you see here. This is the sample ASP.NET budget request approval application that we would use for this demonstration. One very powerful and important feature that AgilePoint Developer provides is the out-of-the-box AgilePoint web controls. These web controls enable the developer to bind the data element from the XML schema associated with the process model directly to the web controls. Let's take an example. On the screen that you see, there is an AgilePoint textbox web control. This textbox web control has a binding name property which enables the developer to directly bind the appropriate schema node to the text box. This feature eliminates the need to code and maintain state management for ASP.NET web applications, as AgilePoint's XML schema-based architecture takes care of this issue and saves developers a lot of the coding effort. Please note that the use of AgilePoint's web controls is not mandatory. As a developer, you can choose to use the out-of-the-box ASP.NET web controls instead, but in that case, the XML schema binding functionality would no longer be available. Now let's take a look at the coding effort required by the developers when using AgilePoint's web application template. If you notice, there is hardly any code that the developers would have to write to achieve state management and data binding functionalities. AgilePoint takes care of the heavy lifting for you behind the scenes. Now that we have designed the process, published it to the AgilePoint server, and associated a front end to it, let's run the process end to end and see how it works. On my screen, I have a shortcut to the budget request ASP.NET application, which takes me to the logon screen. Here, I'm going to log in as Andy and initiate the process instance. This is the front-end form that Andy would have to fill out before initiating the process by clicking the submit button. Notice that the amount requested field is the one that I'm most interested in, since the amount entered would decide the flow of the process. Just to refresh your memory, if the amount is greater than $25,000, the process would flow to the CFO and the task would be created in the CFO's task list for him to either approve or reject the request. A similar task would be created in the manager's task list if the amount is less than $25,000. Since the amount is greater than $25,000, upon clicking the submit button, Andy would initiate the process and a task would be created in the CFO's task list page. Now let's log into the budget request application as the CFO and look at the new task that got created by the initiation of the process. Here we see the task list page of the CFO, which was automatically created by the AgilePoint web application template. Once again, no development efforts were required to create this task list page. The icon here represents the visual running instance of the process, also known as the process viewer. The process viewer is a runtime snapshot of the process that was published to the AgilePoint server. Upon clicking on the Submit Budget Request manual shape, the CFO can gather more information about the requester, in this case, Andy. The process instance is currently active on the CFO approve manual shape and is waiting for the CFO to either approve or reject the application for it to move forward. Now let's go into the CFO's form and see what the CFO has in store. Upon clicking on the CFO approved task, I am taken to the CFO's form. Note that the information that was filled out by Andy is still intact and the amount is greater than $25,000. In this case, it is $30,000, and that's why the task was assigned to the CFO. The CFO has the ability to either approve or reject the process. I'm going to go ahead and approve the request on behalf of the CFO. Notice that as soon as I approve the process would move forward and come to a complete stop. If I reject, on the other hand, then the process would go back to the requester. Let's approve the request. Upon approving the request, as mentioned earlier, the process moved forward and came to a stop. Also note that if I refresh the page, the task that was initially associated with the CFO has now been completed, and hence it is no more listed in the CFO's task list. This concludes our video demonstration for AgilePoint model-driven ASP.NET application development. To summarize the key features and functionalities that were just demonstrated, we showed you the XML schema mapping capabilities on the modeling and the application layers, the built-in Visual Studio AgilePoint web application template, which enables the developers to quickly build and assemble ASP.NET based applications, data population for easily persisting application data to a backend data store without the need to code data access layers, and data tracking to track changes in data to be used for auditing purposes. For more information about AgilePoint, please visit our website at www.ascentn.com or email at info@ascentn.com. Thank you very much for your time.